This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This is podcast number 4. It's the introduction to Respectonomics, and I'm going to call it a paragraph rather than a episode, meaning that there's many more paragraphs to follow. Last time we were talking about the self and looking at how we interact within ourselves in body, mind, and soul. And as we bring ourselves to the point of comfort with ourselves, we strengthen ourselves, enable ourselves to be the best, to reach our potential. That is the self. But the self does depend on other people. And so the title to this paragraph is The Other Self. And the other self is looking at how we interact with other people. There are several aspects to this interaction with other people. I'm going to start us with the body. We talk about body, mind, and soul, and that is the central theme to Respectonomics, that we bring all three to the table. When we are negotiating, engaging with another person, the physicality of our bodies is very important, and how our body is presented to the other person is part of how they perceive us, whether they enjoy our company, and so on. And there are 2 or 3 clues to this that I want to put in front of us. The first one is the business of shaking hands. We're all taught to shake hands. Some of us prefer not to do it, and we do sort of hand signals and elbow mixes and so on. But the truth is, handshakes are a very important part of our culture. And when we shake hands, there are 1 or 2 things. I think everybody knows about the firm handshake and so on. But with that come 2 other things that are important. One is making eye contact. Making eye contact is not always easy, for whatever reason, personal and other. But whatever it is, when we are making eye contact, the way to do it is, rather than staring at the other person's eyes, one of the techniques is to look at that space, that dot, if you will, between the eyebrows. Because when you do that, you effectively are perceived to be looking at the eyes of the other person, but in fact you're avoiding that sense of, call it embarrassment, whatever it is, nervousness, of looking eye to eye. But it's certainly worth experimenting with that, but eye-to-eye contact is the best. And here's the real point of shaking hands, and that is, think of your body position. Think of where your heart is. And what you want is your heart to be facing the other person's heart. That is a genuine expression of the intention of shaking hands, that you are able, willing to connect with the other person. It also shows a degree of vulnerability. And instead of that, if you think of facing the other person shoulder to shoulder, that becomes aggressive and confrontational. The heart-to-heart is part of the authentic experience. It's a sincerity, and it enables us to think just a little bit more about what we are doing when we are meeting with other people. The distance that we should keep from somebody else. Have you ever heard that expression, somebody's in my space or somebody's too far away? The technique there again is to put your hand up to the wall, just like you were raising your hand to reach the shelf. Raise your hand, and wherever your hand is extended, that is the distance that we should be from one another. So there's the shaking hands and the body reaction. Now the mind part of it deals with how do we then engage mind to mind. And in order to do that, there are a couple of techniques that are also helpful. When you are with somebody else, one of the helpful techniques is to look at the person and to think of 2 or 3 things that you like about the way that they present themselves. It might be in their clothing, it might be in their haircut, it might be in their shoes. whatever. But when you start looking at what you like about somebody, the physicality of that looking becomes a subtext to how we are perceived. And frankly, we generate a much warmer feeling. And it's also a very useful technique when you're meeting somebody to look at them and to think about not only what do you like about them, but to express it. What a lovely pair of shoes. What a lovely tie. What a lovely purse. Nice briefcase. These are compliments. And here's a technique that's very, very important for humanity. And that is that when we help somebody to like themselves more, they will like us better. And that's not meant to be gratuitous. It's not meant to be a sort of like a cheap commercial. It's to do with the fact that Respectonomics breathes the language of 2 people, 4 people, and 8 people exponentially getting on with one another. It's not very complicated to look at somebody to think about what you like about them. And then you find that that individual is in fact in, let's just say, a confrontational mood. It's very easy when somebody says, "Hi, it's nice to see you," and you start chatting. You've heard us say that one of the most important questions that we can ask another individual at any time, be it at the counter, be it in the water cooler, wherever you may be, one of the most important questions that we can humanly ask of another human being is, "How is your day going?" That's very different from, "How are you today?" or "What do you think of the weather?" But asking people, "How is your day going?" shows an interest and allows that other individual to express where they are today. It's very helpful. That person we now have thought for a moment might be in a confrontational mood. And we want to put 2 or 3 ideas in front of us about what happens when somebody is in a confrontational mood. It might be a business partner, it might be a customer, it might be a shareholder, it might be somebody on the street, and it might painfully be somebody who operates in the same charitable organization as you do. But you experience confrontation, you experience pushback. What do you do with it? And there are 3 recommendations that very much tie into the situation. It's like everything, you have to read the room. And the 3 possibilities are, the first one is the person says something rather angrily, and you say, "You know, you're saying that with a degree of conviction. Would you mind telling me your reason?" Perfectly fair. Second one, you say that with a degree of anxiety. "Can you tell me the reason for that, please?" And the third one is this. Somebody's letting into you. I'm not sure if that's very good English, but somebody is pulling you across the carpet. And one of the things that is always helpful is to be able to say to that individual, "Let me make sure I understand you correctly and clearly." And what you do is, quite literally, repeat back what they said. So if somebody says to me, "Your tie is really ugly, and I think you should get a new silk one," I could say, "Let me make sure I understand you correctly. You're saying that my tie is ugly, and I should be wearing one with different patterns or different colors." And what's fascinating is this. When we repeat back to somebody what they have said to us, the backing away is significant. "Oh, I didn't quite mean that. What I meant was, that is a beautiful tie. I think another color would do very well with that jacket." Totally different discussion, non-confrontational, and it avoids me getting defensive. "I like this tie. It was given to me by my wife." I don't have to go into any explanation. I can now hear the reason. One of the best reasons for doing that is maybe that individual has a valid point, and therefore this allows me to hear the point without, again, my having to be defensive. So those are 3 possibilities. You say that with some degree of conviction. "Can you tell me what your reason is?" You say that with a degree of anxiety, or I'm sensing anxiety. "Can you tell me what the reason for that might be, please?" And I'm going to repeat back to your satisfaction so you know exactly that I understand what you're saying to me. And then you repeat back to them what they said. And you can do it gently. But those are three alternatives to try and dilute antagonism, confrontation, or push-awayness when we experience it. Now, where the soul is concerned, we've talked here about the body and the mind. I want to talk a bit about the soul now. And that is one of the most powerful techniques that we have. Because we talk easily about soulmates. We talk about people who are knitted at the soul. And it's an extraordinarily attractive expression. It's one that says that these two people, you can see it in marriages sometimes, you can see it between a mother and a child, you can see it between two very close friends, where we refer to them as soulmates. And the basis for that is when we are with somebody else, to allow our soul to interact, to engage with the soul of the other individual. It's strictly a matter of will, it's a matter of intentionality, and all you do, and all I do, is I'm standing with you, sitting on the sofa, I'm at the theatre, I'm walking down the street, but allowing myself to know that my soul has the right and the privilege to engage with another soul is probably the icon of humanity. And it's well worth doing, because once we allow soul to speak to soul, we eliminate an awful lot of those body and mind confrontations, those things where we become judgmental, discriminatory, we get into gossip, and you think of all those nasties. It helps greatly to eliminate those when we allow soul to speak to soul, to engage with that other individual at the soul level. Now, all of this is what I would call helpful, I believe helpful. But I want to point out something else about the combination of the self and the other self. One of the expressions that we hear, you hear it quite often, that expression which goes something like, I don't care what other people think about me. And first of all, I will put it straightforwardly. That is very unlikely to be true. If it were absolutely true, I don't care what other people think about me, then presumably when somebody gives me affirmation, confirms, approves, enjoys my company, I presume then by the same token I should say, well, that's of no interest to me. Of course it's of interest to me, interest to all of us. We enjoy being affirmed, we enjoy being enjoyed, we enjoy being with other people where we can have a laugh and we can share some ideas. It might even be compassion. We may be grieving, but we can work with one another. So once we've established that we actually do care about what other people think of us, it gets very difficult because then you get into this game of the ego, that I have an ego and I want to be entitled to my opinion. I want to be entitled to my convictions. I want to be entitled to my determination. I want to be entitled to my potential. And these are all fairly reasonable points, that we are given these gifts, we have these opportunities, and you think about how you can take advantage of them. But one of the questions that I think responds better to, I don't care what other people think of me, I think the better question is, what do other people think of us? First of all, I'm turning the cube around and taking myself out of myself and looking at it from another person's point of view. And if I look at another person's point of view and start thinking, what do they think of me, I can get myself into a twist pretty quickly. I can become defensive, I can become egotistical, kind of a lot of things that I just don't want to be. But when I ask the question differently, and I go to the plurality of me, and I say, what do people think of us? That embraces that I am now collectively Jeremy and other people. It might be Jeremy and my family, it might be Jeremy and my organization, it might be Jeremy and my community, and whatever that combination is, it allows me then to beg the question, what do other people think of us? And when we put the us on the table, we reduce that egotistical bent, and we start embracing what matters to us. The family is a very good example. I may say, I don't care what people think about me, but I do care about what people think of us as a family. Most families think in terms of their pride. They think in terms of their reputation. They think in terms of their position in the community and their position in social circles and so on. The truth of the matter is that when we say, what do people think of us, we embrace a far broader spectrum. And I think we can embrace ourselves with other people far more easily. I wonder what would happen if we, in a place of confrontation, wherever it might be in the office cooler, it might be in the boardroom, it might be at the counter, but we said to each other, what do you think people think of us? I think we would come out with far better answers. We would share, we would corroborate, we would collaborate, we would work together. Because we would be looking for an image and an impression, a place of courage possibly, a place where we can actually bind together. And having said that this is true at the counter level or at the office level, I could actually put it a little further and say, how do people see my community, our community? How do people see our board of directors? What do people think of us as a nation? When we embrace this question and allow it to percolate through all of our activities and connections, we stand a far better chance of embracing the other human being. And the key behind Respectonomics is, and I pray it will always be, that we will be looking to see how we can bring about, restore, regain, rebuild, rejuvenate the dignity of the human being. Looking at my own strengths, my possibilities, is perfectly reasonable. But how much higher that calling is, when we look to see how we can take our own individual blessings and strengths and dovetail them into other people's lives. I want to conclude with one comment. We talk about what do other people think of us. We've explored that. But there's another question. Quite often we are told, don't use the word what, use the word how. Okay? How do other people think of us? And there's a terrible truth to that. A lot of people don't think about us at all. We think that people are thinking about us all the time. The truth is they're not. So when we find ourselves in a place where somebody has said something mealy-mouthed or unpleasant, confrontational, I think it's also reminding ourselves that was that 1% that was making our life difficult, but 99% aren't even thinking about us. I think our job is to take that 99% and to be able to show them that we care about them and that they care about us, and that together we can mount stadiums and icons and places beyond imagination. I rest my case.